I always get memories of being a teenager. And I walk past what was the Glebe Police Boys Club. I don't know what they call it now. The Police Citizens Youth Clubs. Okay, all right. So I'm feeling pretty good today, and that's because I took a big dose of my full spectrum cannabis oil last night. I took a big dose because I had to be well today. Had to walk. Had a few things I have to take care of. And it's really important because I've actually run out of this oil. Although I've got cannabis to vape, I need the oil when I go to sleep because otherwise I have these fits that I wake up to, and they're very bad, and they can actually come close to choking me as well. It's a very, very odd thing. It's all come about, as I've said in these videos, because I've got bone marrow failure. I've been a tainted blood victim. I've got hepatitis C. I've had it since I was a kid. And so I've got no cannabis oil until I get more. Maybe that'll be a week from now or whatever, whenever I can, get it to happen. It costs enormous amounts of money, and anyway, I don't have the money. I've actually been helped all these years by really good friends and volunteers of Infected Blood Australia, but it's time that I stood up on my own 2 feet because it's outrageous. I've had, my best mate has spent fortunes, and he's no Rockefeller. He's just a wonderful man. So, basically, I'm making use of today, okay? I'm making use of today because I'm well today. And there are other tainted blood victims in our group that will know exactly what I mean, okay? If you can catch a couple of days, because, for example, sleep is very difficult for a lot of people who've got end-stage liver disease or cirrhosis or fibrosis. They can have big sleep problems. It's a big problem in our group. This is what first interested me really about cannabis-based medicine, because of its wonderful sort of the results it's had in post-traumatic stress disorder, which I have and is actually right throughout our group. And also it's fantastic for people like me with bone marrow or cancers or hepatitis C. It's wonderful. It's an antiviral. It's everything. If I rely on big pharma, which I'm going to have to do now for the next week or two or whatever, it's chaos. It's pills everywhere, and it's something I like to avoid because these things damage my liver, and I'm very big on protecting it. I'm teetotal, I don't smoke, anyway, I'm going through what used to be the Harold Park Trots, and I used to absolutely love this place, even though I'm not really into gambling or anything like that. I used to love it because I used to come down with my mates and go and drink. Well, they're units now, but I go and drink at the bar there and watch these incredible races, the trots. I think it was a huge thing anyway, years ago, and I think it closed. I think it's been 10 years since they closed it, and they built these units. But I've got to tell you something, that Harold Park races, the last ever race I was there for before they sold it and made it into units. And I remember, I'm not a gambler, don't really have that bug, but I was with my best mate, and it was a very important moment in our lives, actually. A big thing had just happened. And I remember actually saying a bit of a prayer, saying, come on, I wanted to win the race for my mate. So I actually did put a bit of money on this last ever race at the Harold Park races. And I just sort of said to myself, come on, I want to win for my best mate because he loves, that sort of thing. And we got the win. We won the last ever race at the Harold Park races here at Harold Park here in Sydney. Glebe, basically. Forest Lodge, whatever they call it. So it's a weird little area. So today I'm using this time to really make use of it because I know I've got some major illness coming up. And I used to be really, really scared. Now I'm just frustrated. That's truth. I've just got to relax. And I used to be really, really terrified of dying. And, obviously I don't want to die a bad death and things like that, but I've become less afraid of that now because I've actually become quite fatigued of the fear. I've had the Grim Reaper hanging over me my whole life, and so have a lot of people in our group. We've got haemophiliacs who've had cirrhosis and cancer and beat cancer, and then cancer comes back, and we've got other women in the group who got hep C from blood given during childbirth who've also had cancers. Okay, they've had surgery to remove those cancers. They're most likely watching now. You're my heroes, truly. because I know exactly what you've been through, decades of having been abandoned, and you're having to work it out for yourself, having to be your own doctors in many cases, your own counsellors, your own everything. It's terribly wrong. It really is. It's very sad. So I'm going to get some stuff today, get shopping done, and get some things done before this illness strikes. If I am to have a stroke or anything bad like that was to happen, then I hope I've done my best to share with Australia our biggest cover-up and our nation's deadliest medical scandal. It was covered up for that reason. It's been covered up by Australia's bureaucracy, who didn't want to lose money from their budgets. And so the Labor government in 1994, when they found out that CSL, the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, Australia's biggest jab maker, Australia's biggest blood products maker, now the world's biggest blood products, one of the world's biggest jab makers, had committed manslaughter in the 1980s. They'd knowingly distributed contaminated blood treatments to Australians with the bleeding disorder haemophilia, many of whom were very dear friends of mine, one of whom went to my school, St Andrew's Cathedral School in Sydney, a wonderful school, a great ethos, great former pupils that went there. We want answers. I'm one of them. I've been chasing answers about the death of a pupil of St Andrew's for 30 plus years. And we just heard recently at an infected blood inquiry in the UK, an inquiry that I've been part of as a witness, we just heard a former British Health Minister, Andy Burnham, who was only Health Minister in 2010, call the infected blood scandal a criminal cover-up, and actually said it's corporate manslaughter. Thank you, Andy. What a relief. I've been saying the same for 30 years, and suddenly a big shot politician comes out and says the same, and we're vindicated down here, but we're still suffering under the cover-up. And Andy Burnham was a Labor politician, this British guy who's been so open and so candid about the truth about what went on. And yet the irony is it's the Labor government in Australia who are continuing the cover-up. They're continuing the denial of financial assistance to haemophiliacs and their loved ones, and yet they're victims of manslaughter. I think if you've been following this, you've seen me interview Greg Ball. He was a haemophiliac, still is. He and his brother, were criminally assaulted when they were knowingly given contaminated blood treatments. They're victims of crime, as is every haemophiliac in Australia. These blood treatments came to Australia in the 1980s. People were coerced onto them. They were switched from a far safer blood treatment called cryoprecipitate, made from just one donor in most cases. And they were switched to this new supposed wonder drug made by the Australian Red Cross and CSL in the 1980s, called Factor VIII, and it was made from a minimum in Australia of 7,000 different donors. And if just one of those blood donors, had been infected with anything, the whole batch, the whole vat that made this Factor VIII, every single bottle that went out to thousands of Australians with haemophilia would be contaminated. And guess what else? They exported this stuff as well around the region. So when they realised in the 1980s that they'd infected everyone with this deadly virus Hep C, because they knew they'd killed 400 Australian haemophiliacs with HIV from their blood products in the mid-80s. So now they realise, wowzers, you basically infected everyone with this Hep C, including everyone that used, a lot of people who use the blood supply as well. So what did the Labor government do? They thought, well, crikey, we've got bureaucrats who still want to make a lot of money, and they're some of the ones who are responsible for the contaminated blood. So what we'll do is we'll allow them to privatise Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. We'll make sure there's no inquiry because we're the government in power, and we'll say everything's fine, nothing to see here, and we'll indemnify them. CSL will make a getaway, including those public servants that murdered children and haemophiliacs, and they'll make a getaway and they'll make hundreds of millions, and the company will make billions and billions. And the victims and their families will just have nothing but death and misery for a generation. That's what happened. So if anything was to happen to me, I actually feel really good today. I don't feel depressed or sad or anything. And as I've said before, I'll never ever commit suicide because I actually have got strong faith. And it's all good. It's never going to happen. As I said, I hope to be like Don Bradman. And there you go, there's a cricket pitch. It's appropriate right at that moment. I didn't even think of that as the cricket pitches walked past. I hope to be like him and hit a big cricket score with my life. I'm going to do everything to make that happen. But my illness, it's getting it's progressing, and it's kicking my backside a little bit. I knew this was coming, though, for decades. I've watched other people in our group, get progressively worse and also unfortunately die. They had things like motor function problems after having had Hep C for decades as well, like I've got now. I've also got this phantom thing when I don't take my full spectrum cannabis, where I've got a thing that my bladder basically tells me I have to go to the bathroom all the time, and it doesn't. It's to do with my nervous system. It's torture. It really is. And you'll never sleep. Without the intervention of medicinal cannabis, no matter what drugs they give me, I'll be awake for weeks, up to the point where I'll hallucinate because of the inflammation in my brain, and all the problems. So the thing, though, I can say smiling because I feel well. I won't be feeling well tomorrow, the days afterwards necessarily, but I'll say this, I feel good about the fact that I know that videos exposing Australia's biggest cover-up of the contaminated blood scandal has been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. Not everyone's a follower. It's a squeamish, I didn't want to be a contaminated blood victim. I'm not into whinging, or I'm not into that. I was a reluctant activist, to be honest. It was purely in the face of evil. It's what this is. This is murder. People have been murdered. Haemophiliacs in Australia have been murdered. So that's why I can't live with this. I couldn't do it on my conscience. I don't know how they do it. People have asked me, how do politicians like Australia's Health Minister, Mark Butler, who's still continuing the cover-up and the denial of assistance, people are dying. They're getting worse off for not being helped. And I was asked, how does he sleep at night? And I said, he sleeps. They sleep soundly. Okay, because the reason why is because of who they are. There's a filter in our political system that if regular average Joes, men or women, decide, I want to do something, by the time that they get through the process, they are battered and bruised like you would not believe by the party machine and all its tricks. Liberal, Labour, all of them. Okay? They're basically, they don't want new blood. Okay? So, and I think 95% of them are all owned by big business, big food, big pharma, the whole thing. So if you're just a regular Australian who says, hey, we don't want patients knowingly harmed, and if they are, we want them helped. We don't want cover-ups. It'll fall on deaf ears, okay? That's how bad it is. But the good news is that regular Australians know, and that's what I've been counting on. Yes, we've lost our politicians. They've never done anything for decades, really. Yes, our laws and our courts, find it difficult when a government, because basically when governments lie to the courts, what can the courts do? The courts, to a large extent, are dependent on the other institutions doing their bit. And is this a rare circumstance that governments lie to the extent that they have in Australia about things like contaminated blood? Okay. I don't know how frequently that happens, but we know that Andy Burnham, who is this former British health minister, who spoke up about infected blood at this inquiry we've been part of, he said that basically the British government has lied about atomic testing that was done here in South Australia, that was done on British servicemen who had no idea they were being tested on, apparently. But also, don't forget, we had Australians and Aborigines that would have been subject to this in South Australia. Okay, no inquiry, no answers, no help for those people suffering the ill effects, or loved ones who are, traumatised by the ill effects of their relatives. Nothing. Yet another cover-up. And Andy Burnham spoke about that. He spoke about the Hillsborough Scandal, the football stadium where so many people were killed. Police in England blaming it on hooligans, and yet relatives of those who died knew nothing to do with that. There weren't any hooligans there. Their children, their husbands, they weren't hooligans. They were killed in a crush because police had let too many people into the ground and were not being upfront about it. And that's what was found to be the case. And you've got the Grenfell Tower, that terrible fire in the UK, and all these other things which, end up being problematic. And it's the same here in Australia, okay? Because these bureaucrats and politicians know that they can lie, deceive, cover up, cheat, destroy documents, whatever they want, right? And there's no accountability, okay? There's just none. There's just none. In fact, there's rewards. It's the opposite. It really is. I mean, CSL are now worth $140 billion. I mean, if people had known about the manslaughter, had it been addressed at the time, you know, had the Labor government done the right thing at the time when they knew about it, because you see, we have documents that prove that the Labor government knew about it in the mid to late 80s, and even before then. But they didn't want to do anything, because what you find out is a lot of those bureaucrats, a lot of those politicians here, they get in on the idea that they're serving us, right? Because we're the mugs that vote them in and pay for them. But as soon as they get there, they put their hands straight into the cookie jar. Okay? And why else, for example, I want to ask you the question. Why was Australia's largest jab maker and blood products maker privatised in 1994? What was the reason? Have a look on the internet, okay? Have a look on the internet and you will see there's articles about how the privatisation of the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories was the worst privatisation in Australian history for the Australian taxpayer, for the owner. Okay? So why was it sold in 1994? What was the reason? Can anybody out there tell me? My name's Charles Mackenzie. I'm the president of Infected Blood Australia. I'd like to know the reasons, because I know the reason. And so do victims in our group. So do haemophiliacs and their loved ones here in Australia. And now so do people internationally, including friends of ours in the UK. Haemophiliacs and their surviving relatives, yeah, they know too. The reason why Australia's biggest jab and blood products maker was privatised in 1994 was so it could escape from the corporate manslaughter and the killings of 1,400 Australians with the bleeding disorder haemophilia. Okay? And that's why. And that's why it's become a $140 billion company today. Okay, with lots of power. They get to censor people like me, left, right and centre. Social media is on their side. ABC's on the ABC, Australia's broadcaster, has refused to investigate the CSL link to the haemophilia killings for 30 years. Everything's on their side. All we've got is just, the truth and our facts and word of mouth, because their censorship can't stop Australians having that, the word of mouth, where we could talk to each other and just say the truth, which is CSL got away with Australia's worst treatment scandal, and we're suffering under a corrupt public health system right now, big time. Okay, so thank you for listening to me today on this walk I took on Friday morning. Oh, just getting that sunshine is absolutely beautiful. I'm going to need it in the days ahead. Good luck to you.